Hello, this is Mr. Kissinger here. This is 5th grade math, module 1, lesson 6. Today we're going to compare decimal fractions to the thousandth using units and express comparisons with greater than, less than, or equal to symbols. So, number 1, show the numbers on the place value chart using digits. Use greater than, less than, or equal to compare. Explain your thinking in the space to the right. So we are going to use our place value chart to kind of map out these numbers. Our first two numbers that we need to compare, we have 34 and 223 thousandths, and we have 34 and 232 thousandths. So let's put those into our place value chart. We know that our decimal point is right here, so we have 34 and 223 thousandths. We have 34 and 232 thousandths. Now, remember when we look at our place values to the left of our decimal, here is our ones. And then we have tens. This would be our hundreds place. We don't have any hundreds right now. So we have ones, tens, hundreds. If we want, we can put a 0 in for those hundreds because we don't have any hundreds. And then to the right of the decimal place, we have tenths. We have hundredths, and we have thousandths. So, another way that we can look at these numbers is this could be 34 and 223 thousandths. We could express that as a fraction with 1,000 in our denominator. This down here we could express as 34 and 232 thousandths. Those are just two ways to look at the same number. So we need to figure out which one is greater and which one is lesser. So let's look at our first number here, and we'll start with our, this is a trick I use with a place value chart, is you can start with your leftmost place value, your greatest place value, and you just compare, and you say, okay, let's look at our hundreds. If this hundreds place is a 1, I know 134 is bigger than just 34. We have a hundreds place. So we're going to keep going from left to right until we find a place value that is larger, and one that is smaller. So we'll start with our hundreds, 0 and 0. We have 3 and 3 in our tens place. We have 4 and 4 in our ones place. We have 2 and 2 in our tenths place. So everything is the same so far. Wait a second, now we go to our hundredths place, and we have a 2 in our hundredths on this top number, and we have a 3 in our hundredths place in our bottom number. So we just look at which one is a greater number. Our greater number is 3, and so we know that this number here is going to be greater, and that one was 34 and 232 thousandths. So we put our less than sign in here, and I put this big part of this comparison sign toward the bigger number. Or I know sometimes you may have learned it before, as the alligator eats the bigger number. Or I like to do Pac-Man. Pac-Man eats the larger number. So you are going to put a less than sign in there, and we are done with number 1. So let's do this again, except with a series of numbers, or a pair of numbers that have a different amount of place values as far as the way that they're written here. We have 0.8 or 8/10, then we have 0.706, which is 706 thousandths. So we have tenths and we have thousandths. Those are a little tougher to compare just from looking at them. Now, at first glance, we might go, okay, well, 706 is bigger than 8. But let's be careful because we don't have all of our place values filled in. So let's draw out our place values here. I'll put our decimals right here. Now, to the left of our decimal point, it looks like we have zeros. So that's our ones place. And again, this is our tens, and this is our hundreds. And then we have our tenths. We have our hundredths. And we have our thousandths. And if we want to go even further, this would be we just add another zero, and we'd make this our 10,000ths place. We don't have to worry about that right now because we don't have a 10,000ths place, and we're not going to be working with that today. But you can keep going. You get 100,000ths, you get a millionths. The further to the right you go, the higher that denominator becomes, which means that we're splitting into more pieces, and each one of those units is going to be smaller than the next, even though the denominator is getting bigger. Remember, when our denominator gets bigger in a fraction, the number becomes smaller, as long as the numerator stays the same. But that's neither here nor there. We're going to continue with this. We look at our tenths place here for our first number, and then our tenths place is 8. So we'll put an 8 right in there. In our tenths place of our bottom number, we have 7. In our hundredths place, did I forget my 0 there? I did. So we're going to add another 0 in our hundredths place. We have a 0, and then in our thousandths place, we have a 6. So we have 706 thousandths. Let's expand our first number out to the thousandths place too, and we'll just draw in zeros because after the decimal, we can add those zeros after our number. That's the same number. 8/10ths is the same as 80 hundredths or 800 thousandths. Because we're adding, if we looked at it as a fraction, we could do 8/10ths, but we can also make that 80 hundredths, or we can make it 800 thousandths. And they're all the same fraction because remember, fractions are division. We're dividing. So when we divide, we would just take off those zeros. We would cross them out, and we would still get 8/10ths. So they end up being the same number. Whether you can call it, they're equivalent fractions. They're either whether you call it 8/10ths, 80 hundredths, or 800 thousandths. So we can start on our right, 0 and 0, or start on our left, and move right. We would have 0 and 0, and then we move to our tenths place. In our tenths place, which one is greater? Well, 8 is greater than 7, so we don't need to worry about any of this over here because we already know that 8 is greater than 7, so this number is greater, the one on the top. I'll put a little star there, and that one's greater. So we know 0.8 is greater than 0.706 or 706 thousandths. All right. So let's do one more. It says use greater than, less than, or equal to signs to compare the following. Use a place value chart to help if necessary. So we'll look at 16.3 or 16 3/10, and then we have 16.4 or 16 4/10. So if I change these to mixed fractions, I'm going to do 16 3/10, 16 4/10. Well, we know the 16s are the same. So let's move to our fraction fractional part here is 3/10 or 4/10, which is greater. Well, we know we look to our numerator. If the denominators are the same, the greater numerator is going to be the greater number. So 16 and 4/10 is more than 16 and 3/10. Another way we can look at it is if we made our place value chart, which I'll do right up here. We only need 3 place values, but we'll make 4. And we can put our decimal point right here. And we have our ones place, we have our tens place, we have our tenths place, and we have our hundredths place. In the top, we can put 16.4, or yeah, we'll do 16.4. It doesn't matter which one. Which one goes in the top and which one goes in the bottom. This one will do 16.3. And we go 1's the same, 6 is the same. 4 is greater than 3. So we know this one's greater. And 16.3 is less than 16.4. Now we can do the same thing without our place value chart as well. If we look, we can just move from our left to our right. We go, okay, 1, 1, 6, 6. Those are the same. 3, 4. We look 4. 4 is greater. We don't need to move on any further. We know that 16.4 is greater than 16.3, and 16.3 is less than 16.4. So we're going to stop right there. So showing a couple different strategies that we can use to compare decimal fractions, at least up to the 1,000th place. But like I was saying, I mean, if we added another number here, I mean, if we can go to the 10,000ths, we can go to the 100,000ths. It's going to be the same thing right down the line. So that should help you understand how to compare numbers that are expressed as a decimal a little bit easier. We will look forward to seeing you guys next time, and have a great rest of your day.